Year 11, this is just a revision kind of podcast to help you do extremely well in questions on prejudice. So let's get going. One key thing you need to know for this unit is the different types of prejudice. So as this advert shows from America in the 1950s, one type of prejudice would be racism. Others would be things like sexism, homophobia, phobia, religious prejudice, prejudice against people with disabilities, or prejudice regarding people based on their appearance. You then need to think about why people are prejudiced. So if you think back to our studies in class, the main reasons are things such as fear, upbringing, your parents, your peers, lack of education, so ignorance, the media, or you might use terms like scapegoat. Talking of key terms, here are some of the main key terms the exam board would expect you to have an understanding of, and often these come up for 1 or 2 marks. So let's take the first one, prejudice. What is prejudice? Well, prejudice is based on your opinion, your attitude, not on fact. Discrimination. This is when you put that opinion into action. So, for example, your prejudice might be that you think all blondes are bimbos. And as an owner of a company, you put that into action when a blonde and a brunette come in, and you hire the brunette with less qualifications over the blonde because of your prejudices. So it's prejudice in action. Scapegoat. People to blame, such as the Jews during the Holocaust. Stereotype. A fixed mental image that you might have of a group of people. The others are tolerance, so to accept, justice, fairness or equality. Quick bit of revision then on some of the key teachings from the Christian perspective. The main ones I'd expect you to revise, use and obviously apply are the ones that I've listed here. Love thy neighbour is the key message from the story of the Good Samaritan. Here you have an injured person, and it's the Samaritan who takes care of this chap, puts him on the donkey, takes him to an inn, and tells the innkeeper to take care of him. Jesus says, you go do the same. In other words, love and help your neighbour. Another great teaching is the parable of the sheep and the goats. Here it's a reminder to all Christians that you're going to be judged on your actions on Judgment Day. It's a reminder that feed the hungry, help with those in need, because your actions will be judged. Another great teaching from the book of Genesis, we're all made in God's image, a reminder therefore that we're all equal. Some teachings that you might use when you're talking about sexism, which might imply, sexist teachings, is that Eve was made to be Adam's helper. She's made from his rib. Other key teachings, love your enemies, turn the other cheek. And the great one from St. Paul when he writes to the church at Galatia is there's neither male, female, Jew or Greek, we are all one in Christ Jesus. But you've got to remember, St. Paul's quite contradictory, because on the one hand he talks of equality, but on the other he's quite sexist in his views. It's from him he says that women shouldn't lead the church, should dress modestly, and basically should be quiet, should be seen and not heard. The key Buddhist teachings, as always, is metta, we're talking of love, karuna, you should always show compassion. You could also link it to when Siddhartha Gautama was sat under the Bodhi tree, and during his journey, you could say, to enlightenment, he was tempted by Mara. We can be tempted to do the most dreadful things, especially if people have been vicious to us. Another key teaching is that in the Sangha, everyone's equal, so this should be promoted throughout one's life. And finally, clearly, the first precept says that you shouldn't harm. If you're being racist or sexist, you're harming another fellow human being, and that's wrong. Wrong action. So now we've had a bit of revision time, let's apply it to what it's all about, which are the GCSE questions. So the first then is give 2 causes of racism. Easy. You don't spend ages writing this, you give 2 bullet-pointed answers. So as I'm talking, you think about your 2 causes, and hopefully you came up with some of these. The main ones I've said: ignorance, upbringing, past experience, lack of education. You don't write out lots of sentences. It's boom, boom, 2 bullet points, because you've got to pick up more marks elsewhere, and you want to spend your time on the 6-mark responses. Next question. Explain why some religious believers might support positive discrimination. Now make sure you revise this key term. It comes up time and time again, and some people forget what that actually means. So let's look at my response. Some religious believers, such as Christians, might support positive discrimination as it's encouraging all to show agape. Remember, that's that Greek term meaning unconditional love, which is supported by the teaching, love thy neighbour. Many Christians feel that this would encourage the employment of minority groups, such as the disabled. Others, such as Buddhists, would equally support this, as they feel that one should show metta and karuna to fellow human beings. As long as this does not harm, then they support positive discrimination. Next. We know this is an evaluative question. The statements in speech marks is asking for your opinion, but this is only worth 3 marks, so we're not going to spend too long on it. Religious believers should help victims of prejudice. Straight away you're thinking some Christians would help because they would use the golden rule of love thy neighbour. Again, this is faith in action, so of course they should help. However, other Christians may disagree and say that this is not just for Christians to help, but for all. And then finally, your last sentence, put your opinion. But you might want to do it this way. You might want to, rather than I've just shown you, of giving an agree, a disagree, and your opinion, you might want to do it in the following way and just give your opinion and support it with a very developed reason or some simple reasons. 3 marks, remember. So I use the golden rule and that everyone should help, but there's some of the other teachings you could have also used. Next, describe the work of one religious believer who's fought against prejudice. 4 marks. This is a great question. We've studied Martin Luther King, we've studied Gandhi, so naturally you're going to use one of them. Oops, I'm getting excited with all my bits and bobs. So here we've got Martin Luther King. And in your response, you know that in order to get 4 marks, you have got to be able to show a clear knowledge and understanding with some development. So you need to be thinking, how and why did Martin Luther King or Gandhi do what they did? So let's talk about Martin Luther King first of all. He fought against prejudice in the following ways. He organised bus boycotts. He did this in a non-violent, peaceful way. His biggest influence was in fact Mahatma Gandhi. Why did he do this? Well, he did this because he was a Christian, and he would refer to Christian teachings and Jesus' efforts in many of his speeches. So make sure, if you're referring to Martin Luther King, that you're detailing how and why this amazing man did what he did. Likewise, if you're referring to Gandhi, you would refer to how he did this. Again, he did this in a non-violent, peaceful way. He used methods like satyagraha, the force of truth. He used Hindu teachings like ahimsa, meaning non-violence. And he fought against apartheid laws in South Africa. He fought to get rid of unfair poll taxes and to have Indian marriages recognised and therefore be legal. And in his own country, in India, he fought against the injustices of the caste system. He sided and worked with the untouchables, or as he called them, the Harijans, the children of God. So this is a great question to get some good marks, so make sure you've revised Martin Luther King and Gandhi in case a question like this comes up. Last one, our final evaluative question for 6 marks. A tricky one, but a standard one. Religious prejudice is the worst type of prejudice. Now in your mocks, you had one very similar to this, but rather than saying religious prejudice, it just said fear. So this is a common kind of evaluative statement for this unit. So as always, we're thinking about how are we going to disagree, because the agree side's quite easy. So you might, before you even attempt the question, quickly brainstorm some of the key responses and teachings you're going to use in response to this statement. So again, to get 6 marks, it's got to be well argued, with evidence, with teachings, in order to ensure the 6 marks. So some of the main arguments that agree are here, and disagree just here. So using both of them, I'm going to apply it to Drira and show you how you get all marks. Alright, let's take the DRE first of all from Drira. Some would disagree and say that other types of prejudice such as racism and sexism are worse. It seems ridiculous that in 2013 in many of the top FTSE 100 companies in the country that women are still not earning as much as their male counterparts. We have to assume that women are not earning as much due to maternity pay or the assumption that women will want children or be affected by their children, i.e. through sickness or taking days off work. This goes against the golden rule within Christianity of love thy neighbour. This implies that all are to be treated the same. To the agree side. However, many Christians might agree with the statement, as they might look back in history to one of the most horrific examples of religious prejudice, the Holocaust. This event highlights with time and things like propaganda how people can believe and then blame a whole race for a society's problems. Anti-Semitism dates back hundreds of years. The Jews throughout history have been persecuted as Christ killers. Again, this goes against so many Christian teachings which imply all are to be treated equally. St. Paul wrote to the church at Galatia that there were no male, female, Jew or Greek, as in Christ Jesus we are all one and the same. My final thought there, obviously with my little Evie, if you think back to the revision session, I showed you a clip from Evie talking about kind of prejudice. And I think it was really, really evident that this is something that is learnt. This is learnt behaviour. You could think back to her little clip. She had no clue about the differences in people. You know, she's a young girl who's just started school in a class with people of different nationalities, religions. Yet at the age that she is, those differences don't matter. She doesn't see it, and it highlights to us that this is learnt. Good luck, Year 11.